Michael Horn is representing my client, Jose Ortega, who is a United States citizen and is being accused of attempted sale, drug possession, and drug paraphernalia, and he is being accused of these crimes by the DEA agent, Franklin Thomas. I'm not going to say he is guilty of these crimes, nor will I incriminate him, but what I will say, even if he was guilty, as the accused says, I will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that intent to sell, drug possession, and drug paraphernalia was in his constitutional rights according to the 9th Amendment of the Bill of Rights No. 2 and the 14th Amendment Section 1. To prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt, I will provide the 9th Amendment of the Bill of Rights No. 2, explain to the courts here today what all drugs has in common, and compare it to the type of charges the accused is charging my client of, while comparing it to what McDonald's and Burger King is doing as of now, which will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that drug dealing is no different than what McDonald's and Burger King is doing. Furthermore, this will prove beyond a reasonable doubt intent to sell is considered unconstitutional laws according to this new evidence. And if intent to sell is unconstitutional law, so is drug possession charge and drug paraphernalia charges. It's also considered unconstitutional according to this new evidence that I have provided here today. We will also provide and break down the 14th Amendment Section 1. I call this Exhibit 1, 9th Amendment of the Bill of Rights No. 2, and I call DEA agent Franklin Thomas to this stand. For DEA Frank Thomas, state your name to the courts. Franklin Thomas. What is your profession? I'm a drug enforcement agent of the USA. Read the 9th Amendment of the Bill of Rights No. 2. What to work in your job be qualified? For the record, ask yourself, what does all work or job has in common? I tell you, all job has three things in common. They are supply and demand, competitive, and pay. McDonald's versus Burger King. Supply and demand would be the food. Likewise, drug dealers versus another drug dealer. Supply and demand would be the drugs and the drug paraphernalia. McDonald's and Burger King are competitive, likewise. Drug dealers versus drug dealers are competitive. McDonald's and Burger King get paid with a paycheck. Likewise, drug dealers and drug dealers get paid cash. So, with this new evidence, what McDonald's and Burger King is doing is no different than what drug dealers is doing. And if being a drug dealer should be illegal, so should selling McDonald's and Burger King food should be illegal too. Likewise, if selling McDonald's and Burger King food isn't illegal, neither should being a drug dealer, so having drugs and or drug paraphernalia on the possession should not be illegal either. I am calling this Exhibit 2, the 14th Amendment Section 1. Franklin Thomas, read the 14th Amendment Section 1 to the court. No state should make or enforce a law which shall abridge the privilege or immunity of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction to the equal protection of the laws. I break down the 14th Amendment Section 1 of the United States Constitution piece by piece to prove beyond a reasonable doubt making, voting on, and enforcing these unconstitutional laws is actually violating a federal law which is also violating a federal offense, and the politicians who created these laws, unconstitutional laws, is violating a federal offense and violating federal laws and regulations, and should be sentenced to federal prison and a felony on the record. Furthermore, DEA agent and other law enforcement agencies enforcing these unconstitutional laws is also violating a federal offense and should be sentenced to federal prison and put a felony on their record. Furthermore, attorneys and judges who enforce these unconstitutional laws is also violating a federal offense and should be disbarred from practicing law and should be sentenced to federal prison and put a felony on the record. No state means no state, should make. What does make mean? Make means creating and voting on laws so they can be put on the books of law, or enforce a law, or no state should enforce a law. What does enforce a law mean? Enforcing law is the law enforcement supposed to, which is investigate a crime, gather evidence to convict an unknown subject, prosecute the perpetrator in the court of law, and sentence them to prison time or community. So, which shall abridge the privilege. What privilege is the 14th Amendment Section 1 is talking about? Or civil rights laws, such as the Bill of Rights and other civil rights laws, is the privilege that all United States citizens are guaranteed to have and will continue to have under the 14th Amendment Section 1. But if we, as United States citizens, is being accused in violation of these unconstitutional laws, we are immune to criminal prosecution because as citizens of the United States, it's our constitutional right to be in violation of these unconstitutional laws. What does the 14th Amendment mean by nor shall any state deprive a person life, liberty, property? To explain what the 14th Amendment Section 1 means by this is to explain drug dealers being in possession of drugs, drug paraphernalia, and intent to sell drugs. The government cannot be allowed to confiscate the drugs or drug paraphernalia from the drug dealer according to this section of the 14th Amendment because it is a constitutional right to be in possession of drugs because by selling the drugs, they are making money so they could pay rent and other bills and keep their business and prevent them from getting evicted from their house. Likewise, by selling the drug paraphernalia, they are making money so they could pay rent and other bills and keep their business and prevent them from getting evicted from their house. So by arresting the accused and sentencing them to prison time for being in violation of these unconstitutional laws, the government is depriving my client of life, living property, and the accuser should be held accountable to the violation of the 14th Amendment and should be sentenced to federal prison and receive a felony on his or her record. Without due process of the law, nor denied to any person with his jurisdiction of the equal protection of the law, this section is saying the government cannot deny anybody within the United States citizens of life, living property, and all citizens of the USA are protected by all civil rights laws. So by the government and the law enforcement creating and enforcing these unconstitutional laws or actually or breaking of federal laws and regulations, and should be held accountable to the full extent of the federal government and sentenced to federal prison and put a felony on the record. I have no more questions, Your Honor. You can step down. To finish up, if you want to create and enforce a law such as intent to sell, drug possession, and drug paraphernalia because you are afraid of the health risk that comes with it, you are acting in fear, which you do not have to be afraid because health risk comes in all fields of study, but you just have to learn to minimize these health risks. In the food services like McDonald's and Burger King, eating a lot of their foods can cause one to be overweight and eventually become diabetic. To minimize this health risk, don't eat their food every day, eat it twice a week or 3 times a week. But in the drug dealing and drug cartel field of study, using dirty news can give sexually transmitted diseases, which is a health risk in this field. But you could learn to minimize this health risk. For example, if you legalize all drugs and drug paraphernalia, with exception, if you want to use drugs, it is okay. But you only can use those drugs if you are more than willing to use clean needles only. Furthermore, if you legalize all drugs and drug paraphernalia, no drug dealer will ever shoot anybody because they won't have to worry about law enforcement stopping them from using these drugs or even selling these drugs. On the other hand, if the drug dealer and the client refuse to use clean needles to inject those drugs, you could arrest, try, and convict them in federal court for violation of public safety. The United States was built on 2 principles. The 2 principles that our country was based on was freedom and immigration. In the beginning, when our great nation was created, it was based on immigration. And now today, our country is mixed with all cultures and ethnicity because we are the only country who has a Bill of Rights and other civil rights laws who was guaranteed a long time ago, and the best opportunity that was not guaranteed in another country. Immigrants come to USA to get away from the dictatorship that their own country has to offer. But yet, by taking our constitutional rights away, you are being a dictator, which all these immigrants try to get away from. Not just that, you also are taking the very reason, the very essence that this country was based off of, which are making it more difficult to survive because you violate so many laws and regulations and turning our country into one of the third world countries, which is not just unfair, it's also unethical, inhumane, and unjust. Our country was also created on an ideal that all USA citizens were created equal, and by taking our constitutional rights away, you take all equality away from the people who was guaranteed to. Immigrants come to USA to have a better life for themselves and their own family and receive everything that our country has to offer. And I'm going to utilize reverse psychology. How can you take the right to improve the lives of their family and themselves if you won't take that right away from your own family? By creating laws and regulations that violate our U.S. Constitution and other civil rights laws, you undermine the basic principle that this country was based upon, and by creating these unjust laws that immigrants try to get away from. If you want to create laws and regulations that violate our most priceless freedom that was guaranteed in our U.S. Constitution, go to Europe, England, and any other country that does not have these laws to protect its citizens. But on the other hand, if you want to stay a U.S. citizen, do not create laws and regulations that goes against everything this country stands for. But if you want to still create laws and regulations that goes against our banner's name and violate federal and international laws and break the oath you took to uphold the U.S. Constitution and all other civil rights laws, but yet dishonoring that oath and in doing so breaking federal and international law, in doing the crime you have to pay the time and while in a prison cell. You're supposed to be a role model, and you took an oath to uphold the laws of the federal government, city, county laws, and international law, but yet by breaking that oath you lose our trust. So how can we trust you to uphold the law after you break it? You're supposed to be loyal to our country and the American flag. But by creating these laws and regulations that goes against our U.S. Constitution and other civil rights laws, you dishonor the Statue of Liberty and ban our banner's name and most of people who fought and died for our freedom. Also in the 1800s, Statue of Liberty was given by France to the U.S. to symbolize people who died for our freedom. Our bald eagle is a symbol of hope and shows how it can soar through the sky freely and overcome any obstacle that gets in the way. Star Spangled Banner reinforces the land of the free and the home of the brave. The Bill of Rights reinforces guarantees the right. And when you create these laws, also known as unconstitutional law, you undermine that guarantee. And guarantee is another word for promise. So the founding fathers promised us to have that our constitutional rights are protected, but yet you violate that promise, which in due process, lied to us as citizens of the USA and the voters that you vote you guys into office or ladies into office. When you create these unconstitutional laws, you're creating a bad example, not just on yourself but also on the department as a whole, because you're supposed to be a role model to the people that you serve. And if you create these laws such as these unconstitutional laws, which are laws that undermine our U.S. Constitution and other civil rights laws, you intrude on someone else's rights, and in doing so, breaking the law. And if you break the law, but yet you are telling us we can't break the law or we will go to jail, that's a hypocrite. But if you could get away with breaking laws, we should get away with it breaking laws too. But that's not how the world works. If everybody is allowed to break laws and regulations and get away with it, the world will be in chaos. Because of this, we need law and order. You are supposed to be the law, but yet the law is breaking laws, which goes against everything what law enforcement does or supposed to be. Because as a U.S. citizen or as a citizen as a whole, if we do the crime, we also should be held accountable for that crime and do the crime. Likewise, if politicians, judges, attorneys, and law enforcement personnel do a crime, they also should be held accountable and do the crime. I want to remind you all, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and other civil rights laws are laws too. And so when House of Representatives create these laws and regulations that violate our civil rights laws and vote on it and pass it, and the president signs, but yet that law is the violation of the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the American Disability Act, and all the other civil rights laws. Those federal politicians are breaking laws and should do the crime because they did the crime. Likewise, when the state assembly and the state senate create laws and vote on it and pass it, and the government signs it, but yet that law is violation of any of our civil rights laws, the state politicians are breaking laws and should do the time because they did the crime. Likewise, when the police, sheriff, or federal agent arrest people for being in violation of the Constitution, these unconstitutional laws, they violate the law and should be held accountable to their actions and put a jail and put a felony on their record. Because you are breaking laws and regulations that violate our constitutional rights, you are showing a bad example on the badge, that uniform, your department, but what even worse, you are showing a bad example on the community as a whole. You also showing a bad example to our banner's name and dishonor people who put their lives on the line to die for our freedom. So I say, how can we, as citizens of the USA, supposed to trust you to uphold the law, but yet you are breaking laws? How can us, as a citizen of the USA, trust you enough that you will be here to protect our constitutional rights after you being found guilty of the violation of our constitutional rights? How do we, citizens of the USA, can trust you enough to create, make, and enforce a law that is not in violation of any of our constitutional rights, when the evidence here today, which proves beyond reasonable doubt, you are not here to protect our Constitution. On the contrary, you're here to violate it. In doing so, breaking the law. And because of this, you lose our trust and should be held accountable to the laws and regulations of the federal for being violation of any of these civil rights laws and put a felony on your record because it's called law enforcement, not lawbreaker. So law enforcement, attorneys, judges, and politicians should be held at a higher standard, because with us as voters, they will not be elected to their current position or re-elected to their current position for the next term if they lose our trust. So as citizens of the USA, we are your employers, and if we are your employers, we could also fire you by not voting for you next time. Because of this, we are the ones who vote you all in your office, and if you are not going to do your job and protect our constitutional rights after you swore your oath you would, and not lie under oath, we will find someone who will take your job serious and not create, nor vote, nor enforce a law that violate the oath they took, while at the same time not create, vote on, and enforce a law that is considered unconstitutional, which are laws and regulations that violate our constitutional rights. When you took office, you swore under oath you will protect our constitutional rights of the citizens of the USA. So by creating, making, voting on, and enforcing these unconstitutional laws, you are in violation of the oath you took and should be held accountable to their action. As of course here to hear the evidence today, I have presented here today that the accuser is accusing my client of doing. The accuser is actually in the violation of my client's constitutional right, and the court should find my client of not guilty of breaking any laws and should be released from prison immediately.